Wildlife conservation is an important facet of America today. But what do you do when a protected species becomes a potential problem? This is the question facing many states as black vultures make headlines. One West Virginia company has partnered with several agencies to study the problem and work to find a solution.
So in West Virginia, we have turkey vultures and black vultures. And growing up, most people would be more familiar with the turkey vulture because they were more numerous, years ago. So one of the challenges that we've faced with researching black vultures is that they're protected by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. So in order to work with them, we have to have permits from the Fish and Wildlife Service, and we also have to have banding permits from the U.S. Geological Survey. And so working with these other government agencies was seamless and it was easy to do, but we have to make sure that we have all the permits in place in order to be able to do the work.
Turkey vultures have been in West Virginia for centuries. Black vultures were first spotted in West Virginia in the 1930s. So the first real question is, how did they get here?
Technically, we don't know. We know they migrated up from South America. They weren't introduced. Their populations seem to be growing, but there's just not a whole lot of research on that. So that's kind of one of the benefits of what we're doing is we're hoping to learn a lot more about the species in general. When I think the door opening experience for me was probably in 2016 or 17. We just started slightly becoming efficient at vulture trapping, learning the proper ways, I'm not going to say the proper ways, learning the best way to set a trap to make it the most effective. And, there was a location here in Berkeley County. I'd caught a couple vultures before, and then, we found a large roost, set a trap, and I showed up and there was like 150 birds in it. And I'd never seen that many in one location, let alone in a trap. And, that wasn't even probably a quarter of the birds in the area, and it's very close to this area.
Yeah, so these vultures, they don't fit the normal bird survey. When we look at bird surveys, look at vocalizations and morning and evening sightings, so these vultures have an underdeveloped voice box essentially, so they just grunt and hiss. They don't go out there and call like a canary would. So these bird surveys they kind of miss on vultures. So I think at one point in time the estimated population in the state of West Virginia was like 300 vultures. Well, we know obviously that's wrong. We can take you down here in the quarry and show you 300 vultures today in one spot. So as hopefully this this research will help us understand, like I said, better understand population densities across the state.
In June of 2017, in the early mornings, what we started to notice was that there were black vultures. And there weren't just a few, there were 40 or 50 of them. And the equipment, they were sitting on top of some of the buildings over by our additives area. And my plant manager asked me, what can I do about it? He kept asking, it's like, why are they here? Because they were sitting and picking at the rubber parts of the building. And at first I thought perhaps it might be something to do with potential sulfur, but that wasn't truly the case. It was an oddity. So what do you do about black vultures? Who do you call? It's not like you can call the pest removal. You can't call the state wildlife services because that's an issue that they don't necessarily deal with. So I was able to get in touch with the United States Department of Agriculture, their Wildlife Services Unit, to arrange a meeting to come on site to discuss what some of the options were to either try to get the birds off or manage them. So that, as I did a little quick research on black vultures, and there wasn't a lot to me known at the time, you just can't shoot them, you can't just take them off because they have both migratory bird protection status and they're also listed as a raptor, so it's illegal to hunt them. You would actually have to have permission to a regulatory agency to have the birds removed. And so the USDA was one of the only agencies that actually has permits.
Yeah, so essentially we were doing some vulture projects around Berkeley County and things, and we always had vulture issues on the airfield. And then, we knew there was an issue close by. We were trying to find roosts, thought we were working on one. Then Argos reached out to us, and they're like, hey, that's when Andrew called me one day. He's like, we got a vulture issue. Could you come take a look? And I was like, finally, this place has to be where the problem is. And we show up, and he's got tons of pictures, and we clicked right away. Like, we started talking, and my eyes were getting big, his eyes were getting big. I was like, look, we have a problem. We work right over here across the street at the airfield, and this is not good. Like, our planes are flying across here every day. This is where our vultures are coming from. So, like the next week we had a collaborative meeting with the Guard, Argos, and ourselves, and we all sit down at a table and started discussing things. We're doing some vulture stuff here. Next thing you know, we're talking about research projects. Adam's involved, and it kind of just, once we started rolling it just kept moving. It was like, this is a well-oiled machine at that point.
Having the tower, we spent some time on the tower, sitting and understanding. So we had a long conversation of what he wanted to accomplish. And as far as regionally, animals don't have boundaries. All right, so that's one of the key things you have to look at. And when you stand on the tower here, the Martinsburg plant is the highest object in 30, 40 miles, and there are 4 states. All right, you have Maryland and Pennsylvania to the north, Maryland to the east, Virginia to the south, only 20 minutes, and you can see it from the tower. And you're in West Virginia. So when you look at the tower and you look out, there's the Air National Guard Air Base, not even 2 miles away. And there's their transport planes landing. And then you see birds circling on the tower. You realize that this is a much bigger potential issue than just, I have some birds that are sitting causing me some problems on my site.
It's important to remember that vultures are important to the ecosystem. So what is the big difference between the turkey vulture that's local to West Virginia and the black vulture, which has only shown up over the last century?
They both serve the same purpose in the ecosystem. They're a very valuable critter to have around when it comes to cleaning up, any roadkill and things like that. Turkey vultures are a lot more docile. They're not as aggressive. They're not attacking, newborn lambs or anything like that. Black vultures seem to show up in just more sheer numbers. They're way more aggressive, and for whatever reason, they love sitting on people's cars or houses, and they're just more destructive overall. Size-wise, turkey vultures are a little larger, but essentially they're very similar. So a lot of people call us, and they just assume they're turkey vultures. They don't know. They just know they have vultures. And usually if it's a nuisance call, we know automatically it's going to be a black vulture, but they're going to be talking about turkey vultures, and then you start explaining to them. And so the general lack of knowledge in the public is kind of something that this could help us increase as well, because people just don't know the difference between the two.
The immediate problem was simple. The Argos-Martinsburg cement plant is positioned near residential housing and is a natural roosting area for black vultures. But the 167th Air National Guard Airlift Wing was in perfect view, and these birds were making the quarry their home. Andrew found assistance from Chad and Travis at the USDA. The next step was to combine their efforts with the Bird Aircraft Strike Hazard Program, also known as BASH.
Having worked as an environmental consultant out west in New Mexico, I got to work on Cannon Air Force Base, White Sands Missile Range, and they had the Bird Air Strike Hazard Program, the BASH program. So I was familiar with that. So I put that in my head and said, oh, okay, the birds, it's a strike hazard. And so how do you control it? They need more research. The USDA was only given a certain number of permits to take out a certain number of birds. And Chad could probably document this better than anybody else. At the time, the folks in the wildlife area for West Virginia were saying, well, there's only 300 black vultures in the state. And we were like, no, there's 300 birds on my site. Right? So there was a disconnect between what was actually an inventory of correct number of animals that are here from someone's existing research and bird observations versus what was actually happening on the ground. All right? So if there's a dead deer on the runway, what's that going to draw? Turkey vultures, black vultures. So now I have birds on the runway, and I'm trying to land military cargo plane.
So the greatest danger to planes from birds, historically, anybody who's heard of Sully on the Hudson, birds and engines don't mix. And, birds also can damage other parts of aircraft, but likely those damages are recoverable from, versus taking a bird down an engine, or a smaller aircraft taking some sort of bird can have catastrophic effects, not just losing an engine, but possibly losing an aircraft. Because they found that Argos is a natural habitat for black vultures. And surprising for me was that growing up, I've always seen the lone turkey vulture or, single soaring species. And as I've gotten more and more information or more understanding from USDA and our partners, that these are roosting nesting groups. And you go over to Argos, and there are hundreds of black vultures altogether roosting. And our hope is that the program's going to provide us with information on, where are they truly nesting? We don't believe they're nesting over there, but so putting GPS trackers on, we're at least finding the locations or the actual flights of these birds, to include much higher altitudes than I would have expected. You see the lone turkey vulture over your farm, and you're looking at a bird that may be at 800 or 1,000 feet, but the GPS data is showing these things going up to 5,000 and 6,000 feet to ensure that they're able to travel the long distances that they are doing.
One of the primary things that we needed to understand was, and to prove that we need to be able to take more birds away, you have to prove, one, that there are birds here. How many are here? Are they repeating? And so we thought, how do you know if they're coming back or not? Well, if you tag them and you sight them and you see them, then you know that they're not just migrating through, they're actually staying here. And then they're making this their home, and then they've made it long-term, and it's becoming a long-term issue. I mean, you have to come up with a strategy to mitigate how many birds are here.
Yeah, so a lot of our work is, reducing nuisance and stuff with animals and people, and a lot of that's because we're building and developing and moving into their landscape, their habitat. It's almost exactly the opposite with black vultures. We were here, and then all of a sudden the vultures are showing up in sheer numbers. Maybe it's because we're producing the right structures and things for them to call home, but it's almost like it's the exact opposite of what we're normally dealing with.
The truth is, there wasn't much study on black vultures. This team had to learn as they went along and become black vulture experts. That's not to say that they know everything already and that the job is done, but they are studying these birds closely, and they are learning more and more every single day. In 2019, the USDA Wildlife Services has documented over 5,000 vultures at the Argos Martinsburg plant alone. That's a far cry from the 300 believed to have been in the entire state, which shows just how much information we're getting every single day.
We kind of didn't know what we were getting into when we started working with black vultures. We knew it was a thing, and you start talking to other state programs, and they have vulture issues, and all of a sudden this research project with the 167th and Argos it drew a lot of attention to us. So we got a lot of phone calls from other state programs asking us about our vulture program and what we can do. And they're finding our tagged birds, and they're trapping our birds, and they're letting us know. And so now there's other programs that are going to start trying to mimic or kind of follow suit and do some more research projects or start tagging vultures. So it kind of kickstarted something that might get huge later down the road. So it seems like now everybody's trying to learn. I don't want to say everybody, but a lot of programs that are having issues with vultures are trying to learn more about them. So it's neat that we kind of got to start something like that in our area.
But so one of the things that we've learned is that there are a lot of black vultures that are in the eastern panhandle of West Virginia. We've learned that they move great distances, not only day to day, but seasonally. We've had our birds show up as far away as South Carolina, North Carolina, into Pennsylvania. And so we know these birds move a lot. And the birds that we're managing today may not be the same birds that we're managing tomorrow.
We gave them names the first time around for some of the folks at the airbase. And they all have distinctive, fairly, so far, based on the preliminary data. And you can go onto the site and log in. And I did it this morning. I can tell you where he was 6 hours ago. So I believe number 4 is Argos. And so there's that bird is right here. He was in the quarry today, or 6 hours ago. Another bird is up on the Susquehanna River. That seems to be his location, just south of Harrisburg. Another bird is almost as far south as Charlottesville, Virginia. That's where he's at, between there and Richmond. Another 2 are over in the Potomac River. One's at Point of Rocks. So that they've stayed sort of regional. One is considered, like, I would consider him Argos. He stays here, pretty much. He, she. But we now we'll be working on 8 months of data. Lifetime. It's a lot of information collected. That information can be downloaded into a KMZ file, which can be uploaded into Google Earth, so you can see actually where their flight was on a daily basis. That tells us where are they moving, what are they doing. There's some temperature data, there's some flight time data. That can be taken by some experts and processed.
A big takeaway, from this is ultimately we want to make the skies safe for our partners there at the 167th. They're flying low levels around this airfield, coming and going, and they use the Argos Tower as a landmark, essentially. So when they're cruising over top of that at 500 feet, and we have all these vultures, in the sky, that can present a pretty big danger. It doesn't take very much, as we've seen in the past, to cause a bird strike to cause a huge issue for an airplane. And I think the last thing we want, as wildlife managers, is to look at it and say, what could we have done to prevent that? So.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of our job working with the 167th and help running their bash program. We're not only trying to alleviate the wildlife risk on the airfield, but we're looking into the future and we're trying to pinpoint, what's going to be an issue or where issues are that we're not aware of. So, we knew that this was a spot, So it's just one of those things where this project, the whole program kind of came together and we formed just a great working relationship. And I think down the road in the future, because it's kind of like an industrial area, so there's a lot more stuff being built. So I think, as long as they're flying over there and we got this partnership here, I would imagine that we're going to collaborate with some other industries that are moving in the area and probably just keep this, kind of bash team rolling and just at least make everybody aware of our aircraft strike hazards and try to help them let us alleviate, problems for our air traffic.
Ultimately, these black vultures, from the understanding that I've gained, they were thought to be in much smaller numbers. There have been limited studies in the past on numbers of birds in or around a state, and as such, they are somewhat protected. And I think that the additional studies of further migration, we live here in Panhandle of West Virginia is where the airport is. So we've got Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, and truly Pennsylvania, within 40 miles.
Well, so, you mentioned, we had tagged birds in New York, Ohio. We tagged birds in more locations than just Argos. So Argos, this project with the airfield, with the 167th Argos, kind of kicked off a statewide thing for us as well. Basically, because the more data, the better, right? We're trying to learn about the birds so we can better manage and help reduce the nuisance and the hazards to aviation. So it's crazy because we don't really know yet, and we've got all this stuff out there we're learning. But what I've realized so far is you don't know day to day or week to week where these birds are going to end up. We got birds that we tagged here on the same date that show up one, 200 miles north, one 200 miles south. So we don't know what rhyme or reason why they're going where they're going, but as we slowly put the puzzle together, we're hoping to learn that.
The aviation community, AHAS, has been able to use the NexRad radar. So the weather radar that you see on the news is also being used to identify birds. And so right now I could text on my cell phone and say, what's the bird population in the air over the airport? And but it's those kind of studies and that will help us to determine. I mean, black vultures on the East Coast are absolutely a top 10, if not a top 3 bird in regards to threat to aviation. They're a large mass bird and we're fast moving. And so, the harder you hit a heavy object, the more damage will be done.
Yeah, these birds they're not easily dispersed. They're not easily intimidated. They don't have a natural predator here. So basically, when you go in to try to disperse a rooster or whatever, you have to stay after them. You gotta make it unbearable for them, and then they might move. They might not move far, so you're going to move that problem from one location to the next. So what we're trying to do is just get them somewhere where they're not an issue, and then we just leave them alone. Yes. But here at Argus, you push them off this side of the quarry, they're going to fly to the other side. And there's just no way to travel this area to move them. So it's just something we're going to have to monitor and keep dealing with for years to come, I'd imagine.
So what does the future hold for the Black Vulture program at Argos and the USDA?
One of the conclusions I can give is that they are living here and they are staying here. This is a good habitat. The one side of the quarry is a good location for them to hide away. They have a source of water in the quarry. They have a source of food in the deer and the dead animals that are left on the roadways. They have a source of heat thermals so they can fly and circle. So this is sort of an ideal habitat for them to stay. So unless they were forced to leave, I got housing, I got heat source to fly, and I got food sources. So it sounds like pretty good life for black vultures.
Essentially, I think our next move is to look at our data, and other states are going to start doing this and start looking at their data. We're going to have to start using this data to hopefully better our management strategies towards these birds. First of all, I don't think there's anything we're doing that's going to potentially harm the population just because they're so numerous. But we don't know that for certain. So this we'll be able to learn so much about these birds, as far as how they reproduce and their sexual maturity. There's so many unknowns that it's just exciting to learn more about a species. And obviously, the more we know about them, the better we'll be able to alleviate issues with them.
Right, and I think what we learn here could potentially have management implications, throughout the East Coast, throughout the whole, vulture present range, in North America. So
trying to understand how many birds are here and then using it to educate people about the BASH program and what the potential issues and consequences of, we don't know where this is going. Is it climate change? Why are they here? Why are they moving? All right. Whys, lots of whys. So unless you're willing to pay to track them and then pay to go through the data, someone's got to spend some time doing research. I mean, this isn't my primary job. I'm an environmental manager. I keep the place in compliance. But as part of the Wildlife Habitat Council projects, we applied for Wildlife Habitat Council certification because of this project, and we'll continue to sponsor it, continue to do work for it.
Black vultures are unique in their own way, shape, and form. You can say I'm kind of fond of them. I've worked with them so much. They're definitely not a very attractive animal, but at the same time, you learn to love them if you get to be around them so much. But I've experienced a couple other bird species that kind of react similarly, but they're not even on this continent. It was like during a deployment in Afghanistan, I had some issues with black kites. and they're a raptor. They don't necessarily predate on or scavenge, so they're actually catching, but they would show up in kettles of 1 to 2 to 300 and swarm around the airfield just like the black vultures do. So they were similar, but different continents. So it's kind of crazy to see that somewhere across the world.
So what we need to do next is go out and start educating our employees, explaining what we've been doing with the project for the last couple of years, going out and explaining to the schools. We have a relationship with Spring Mills, so go out and start educating the kids, and hopefully they'll take it home to their parents. Every once in a while we do projects we do science fair judging, and once they get back into doing that, then we can go out and maybe talk about what we're doing in the project and how that could maybe be a science fair project in the future. But it's going out and just educating the community and the employees so that everybody understands what we're doing here, and what our goal is to make things safer and to make sure that they're not having to deal with the harassment from the black vultures and the problems that the black vultures cause.
We've become sort of mini experts on some of the behaviors of these birds. And Chad is clearly much more an expert than myself. Which then begs the question, we need real biologists doing some real study to understand the nature of why the birds are moving and moving beyond their territory.